Paraná cresce com a força da Copel e um novo recorde, o maior investimento da história. O recorde que tem a marca do trabalho no campo, da inovação com religadores que restauram a energia em segundos, da visão que constrói novas subestações e amplia as existentes. A marca de uma força ligada na energia dos paranaenses. Copel, pura energia.
Cada pessoa carrega uma história. E toda jornada é única. São as diferenças que nos fazem mais fortes. Com uma gestão que inclui e valoriza. Que promove respeito, equilíbrio e bem-estar para todos. Nós somos um sistema que acolhe. Na Mútua, todos têm espaço para crescer.
Este é o Paraná, um estado que se desenvolve a cada dia para oferecer a melhor qualidade de vida.
Este é o Paraná.
Com a Sanepar, levamos água tratada a 100% dos lares atendidos e tratamos todo o esgoto coletado.
Mostrando do que é capaz.
E trabalhando sem parar, a Sanepar se tornou a maior empresa pública de saneamento do Brasil.
Este é o Paraná.
E com isso, o Paraná vai alcançar as metas do Marco Legal do Saneamento antes do prazo previsto. Este é o estado que sonhamos e realizamos.
Este é o Paraná, mostrando do que é capaz. Cuidamos do presente com respeito e inovação. Água limpa, vida plena, evolução. Este é o Paraná.
Onde tem Paraná, tem Sanepar. Paraná, terra de gente que trabalha e cuida.
Em casa, no trabalho, nas escolas, pela cidade, onde você estiver, a construção está sempre presente. Uma das indústrias que mais gera emprego e riquezas por todo o Paraná. Seja qual for o tipo de edifício, onde você mora ou trabalha, a construção é a indutora do progresso para os diferentes segmentos produtivos, para os avanços na infraestrutura e para o conforto na casa de milhares de paranaenses. E onde tem construção, tem Sinduscom Paraná. Em nossa história, protagonizamos inúmeras ações em favor do fortalecimento das empresas e do nosso setor, promovendo assim o crescimento e o desenvolvimento socioeconômico do nosso estado. Sinduscom Paraná, a força da construção no Paraná.
O LACTEC nasce para criar e implementar soluções tecnológicas e inovadoras para gerar valor aos nossos clientes. Somos um dos maiores centros de pesquisa e tecnologia do Brasil. Uma empresa privada, 100% nacional, com 5 unidades e sendo referência há mais de 60 anos. O LACTEC atua em diversos mercados, com forte presença em energia, saneamento, meio ambiente, indústria e infraestrutura. Sempre aliamos o desenvolvimento com a sustentabilidade. Já concluímos mais de 500 projetos de pesquisa, desenvolvimento e inovação. Nossa ampla infraestrutura nos permite realizar ensaios e análises laboratoriais acreditados, usando técnicas avançadas de análise. Em serviços tecnológicos, realizamos desde mapeamentos e consultorias até o controle e fiscalização de obras. Assim, o LACTEC vai seguir em frente.
Boa noite a todos, sejam bem-vindos. Eu sou o Luiz Henrique Olavo, diretor técnico aqui do Instituto de Engenharia, e agradeço a presença de todos aqui e aos que estão no YouTube também. Então, o Instituto de Engenharia do Paraná, por meio da Câmara Técnica Universitária, promove o primeiro encontro de 2026 do IEP Talks. O objetivo do IEP Talks é justamente estimular a conversação em inglês. Então, nada mais justo do que trazer alguém que fale inglês nativamente, um falante nativo. Esse é o 30º encontro desde seu início, com o tema Desvendando grandes momentos da história, com o Ben Thompson. O Ben é historiador premiado, autor de best-seller, estrategista narrativo, com mais de 20 anos de experiência documentar a interseção entre resistência humana e inovação histórica. É autor de 14 livros, incluindo a aclamada série Guts and Glory e a premiada série IEP Talks, que examina o papel fundamental da tentativa e erro na história dos avanços científicos da engenharia. É autoridade reconhecida em narrativo. O trabalho de Ben foi homenageado pela Junior Library Guild, pela National Science Teachers Association e pela American Society for Engineering Education. A sua experiência em traduzir eventos históricos complexos em narrativas envolventes de alto impacto levou a palestras em instituições globais como o Smithsonian, o Google e o Boeing Museum of Flight. Atualmente, Ben é o criador e apresentador do podcast Badass of the Week, produzido em parceria com Dwayne Johnson e Seven Bucks Productions. O seu trabalho foi traduzido para vários idiomas e apresentado no History Channel, Discovery Channel e NPR. Além de sua pesquisa histórica, Ben é um produtor e consultor experiente para grandes estúdios de entretenimento, com foco na preservação do legado e na mecânica da liderança lendária. So, Ben, please, be welcome to the Institute and make yourself home.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you so much. And let me make sure that this is going. We got it? Yeah. So I'm going to start with a quote that I think is very powerful. English is the easiest language to speak badly. So I think that's very true, and we're going to find out more about that in a minute. So my name's Ben. I'm an author. I've written a bunch of different books about different historical subjects. Some of them are like, I guess we should probably get that one out of there, and we'll just replace that. So I've written a lot of books about different historical subjects, and they're from a full wide range of things. I'm going to tell a story to start about a Viking. And I don't know if you could tell, I have a little bit of Viking heritage, so I always feel like I need to tell Viking stories. The Vikings, when people think about Vikings, it's a lot of this kind of stuff, which, okay, that is true a little bit, but we'll kind of get in really quickly to the history of these guys. So the Vikings are here's the world, here's Europe in the year 1000. And the Vikings, they kind of lived up here in Norway, Sweden, Denmark. The areas that the Vikings came from had a lot of snow and a lot of just ice and cold. It wasn't a great place to raise livestock or cows or whatever. And so in order for the people that lived up here to kind of make their lives work, they needed to kind of travel around. They would go to the Frankish Empire, which is France or England, Ireland, and they even made their way down as far as the Damascus and Constantinople. They were mostly traders. They built these ships that were very innovative at the time. Nobody was really doing anything like this. It had a keel underneath that would keep the boat from tipping over in rough waters, so they could take it out into open water, which was very unique for this time period. We're looking at maybe the year 800. And what they did, and it had a shallow draft as well, which meant you could not only take this into deep ocean, but you could take it up rivers. And it was, it could be driven both directions. So you could drive it this way onto a land and then drive it back this way. Everybody would just turn around and row the other direction. So this was very useful for them, and the Vikings, they did a lot of trade with the rest of Europe and with the Middle East, and they might have done some raiding and marauding and pillaging and murdering as well and stealing a bunch of stuff. That's kind of the Viking deal. The guy we're going to talk about is a guy named Eric the Red, and he's called Eric the Red because he had this big red beard. He was a Viking who was kind of that Conan the Barbarian style, but he's a little bit different from some of the other Vikings that you might think about. So this is kind of topical, I guess, but have you ever wondered why Greenland is full of ice and Iceland is green? Well, it's because Iceland is based off of the Viking word that looks like that you should probably pronounce Iceland if you were going to read it in English, but for whatever reason, in English you pronounce this word island because it has a silent S, because that's one of the difficulties of learning English. So if you just pronounce it Iceland with the S, then it's Iceland. We have to spell it this way so that Americans or English speakers know that you don't pronounce it island. It's confusing for us as well. Greenland, though, why is it called Greenland? Well, it's called Greenland because Eric the Red went there and he said, men will be more readily persuaded to go there if the land has an attractive name. So, Eric the Red is from Norway. And he was doing all of his little Viking things, attacking Germany and the UK and Ireland and all that good stuff. But he got into an argument, him and his dad got into an argument with some neighbors in Norway. And a bunch of people died, and Eric was barred from Norway. He was kicked out because he killed too many of his fellow Vikings. So he sails out to the west, and he lands in Iceland here, which at the time had been settled by Vikings. Okay, I'll just go to a different island. So he goes there, and things are going okay for Eric. He's got a neighbor, and his neighbor's having a big party. And Eric's neighbor wants to borrow a bunch of benches for his party. Eric says, okay, great, man, you can totally borrow my benches. It'll be fine. It's going to be a great party. And it works out until the guy doesn't return the benches to Eric. And Eric gets a little grumpy about this. And he goes over to the guy's house to say, hey, I need my benches back. And a bunch of people die. And there's a blood feud that lasts for like a month. And like a lot of people are killed. Okay, so now he's barred from Norway and he's barred from Iceland. So what does he do? Okay, well, he can't go down here. He's been killing these people. They hate him. He's been killing these people. They hate him. He's been killing these people. They also hate him. So he's like, okay, I'll go this way. All right. I'm just going to be sad and sail away. So he sails up to Greenland here. And, Greenland looks like this. It's covered in ice. The flag is not green for Greenland. That's how not green this island is. Okay, so he goes there. He doesn't discover Greenland. A guy named Gunnbjorn, discovered Greenland by accident. He was trying to find Iceland and he missed, and he ended up in Greenland. He named this mountain after himself, and then he got out of there. He didn't want to deal with it. It was no fun, and he left. So a couple other guys came by a few years later, and they created a settlement on one of the little islands off the coast of Greenland. They're called Gunnbjorn's Skerries, which is a very weird word. I've never seen this word scary used in English in any other context other than Gunnbjorn's Skerries. I don't know what it means. Anyway, they create this little tiny settlement on one of Gunnbjorn's Skerries, and all of the colonists kill each other. And it's never heard from again. Okay, so that's that. Eric goes there, and he finds this land covered in ice, and he loves it. He thinks it's awesome. He sails up and down all the rivers. He climbs all the mountains. He names everything there after himself. Eric's town, Eric's fjord, Eric's mountain. He thinks it's really funny because they have seals and penguins and things that live there. And those creatures, no humans live on Greenland. This is before the Inuit and everything. He's the first human to walk around on here. So the animals have never seen humans. So he thinks it's hilarious because the penguin will walk right up to you and then you can just whack it with your axe and eat it. And he's like, this is great. I love this. The food comes to you. Great. So he goes back to Iceland. And remember, he's an outlaw in Iceland, which means at this time, Viking culture is very weird. He is an outlaw, which means any person on Iceland is allowed to kill him and they won't get in trouble for it. That's the deal. So anyway, he goes back there and he's like, look guys, I found this awesome place. It's called Greenland. It's green. It's beautiful fields for all of your livestock. You can grow all kinds of food there. There's beer. It's going to be awesome. We're just going to sail off and live on Greenland. It's going to be amazing. And he convinces a lot of people to get in boats and sail to Greenland with him to create a colony there. So remember, these boats look like this, and they're sailing across the open waters of the North Atlantic, and it's raining, and there's wind, and there's giant waves, and there's storms, and some of these people die. A lot of them turn back because they don't want to deal with this. It's terrible. When they finally do get there, a small portion of the people who left actually make it to Greenland, and when they get there, they're like, Eric, this is not what you said it was going to be. And so, but they do set up a colony, and Eric's like, okay, bad news, guys. Like, I'm your king now, and you live here. So this is where, like, you might think you would know where this story is going, but the interesting bit here is that Eric doesn't, like, from this point on, he's kind of a good king. People start to like him, and he does a good job running. He doesn't kill his subjects. He's not a tyrant. He doesn't do what you would think he was going to do based on everything he has done in the past. And people like him, and he's the king of Greenland until he dies. The settlements that he founded are still there, and his son, Leif Erikson, actually sails even, so Eric went from here to settle these two settlements in Greenland. Leif Erikson ends up coming all the way out over here, and he lands in, this is all like part of Canada here, but he goes over to North America. And we know this because we found the remnants of some of the settlements. This is mostly reconstructed, but we have rocks and building structures that are dated to 1000. So they landed in Canada. And so it's very interesting to think, I mean, there were people who already lived in Canada, and this kind of like caused some problems, but we'll skip over that, I guess. So this is what you get. When you have Conan and guy sailing around doesn't know where he's going, that's how you get America. I mean, I guess the Americas. I guess Canada. Okay, why did I just tell you that story? Okay, so this is me. My name's Ben. I'm a storyteller. I like to tell stories. I take interesting things from history and I try to kind of put them in terms that would be something that people who maybe don't know that much about it would be able to understand and enjoy. And, you know, I've written a bunch of different books about a lot of different subjects. I've done some Dungeons and Dragons adventures. I've done a podcast. I've been on TV, all this kind of stuff. And I think that presenting for an engineering group the English-speaking club, we have a lot of things in common. So my job is basically to like take very complicated research and very intricate stuff. There's a lot more going on to Eric the Red's story. There is a lot of geopolitical stuff happening here. You take very complicated things and you have to distill it down for your target audience who might not be as up to date on all of this stuff as you are. So, okay, I think engineering is kind of like this as well. You guys come up with a really good idea, and then you have to pitch it to a group of executives who maybe have no idea what you're talking about, and maybe you're operating in a second language that it might not be your native language, and so you've got to get these guys to understand why they need to spend a bunch of money on this. And that's a similar thing where you have to take a complicated subject and break it down into something that's relatable to people who don't have a lot of background. And that's kind of what I do as well. For instance, I did a book on the American space program. The book is about the US and Russian space program as they're trying to get to the moon. And, you know, there's a lot of complicated stuff going on when you're talking about rocket science. And my background personally, I don't have a lot of engineering here. I stood next to the Millennium Falcon once at Disney World, but that's about as close as I got. I don't have a degree in this stuff, but you can still kind of like think, where can we go from here? How do we begin to try to tell this stuff to a person who, I mean, this book is written for school-age kids. So how do I convert this into something that would be interesting to people who don't know much about it? And so, really, the trick to all of this is to just make it as easy as possible, right? This is the best way to do this is to do a straight line. There is a lot happening here, and whether you're working on an engineering project or assimilating a lot of research for a book or just communicating, trying to talk to another person, the easiest thing is just go A to B, right? So when I'm talking about the Sputnik program in the book, it's not necessarily this. This might be extremely interesting to some of you, but to a person who has no background in this, it's going to be too confusing. I did Sputnik like this. Here's a picture of the thing, a little quote, and I'm not going to like leave this long enough for everybody to read it all, but it's all very basic, you know, trying to get the story across as plainly as possible using regular words. So I think language is kind of like that as well. When I was learning Portuguese, this is all the conjugations of fazer. It's irregular, so nothing else is conjugated like this, and you just have to memorize all of this. And when that was, and that kind of made me nervous when I saw that, because that's like a lot of, that's hard. Okay, so I think making the closest point here is like, I remember talking to my wife about it, and she was like, okay, well, you don't have to learn all of these. There's like some that you can kind of get away with. I still have never used fizeram in a sentence before. No, I have used farão. I've never used that in a sentence. I've been able to make my life work living in Brazil without using a lot of these. And I think that's kind of a good metric for learning English or kind of stripping things down. So, you know, engineering and speaking English is kind of like that. This is kind of a joke here of, you know, the engineering flowchart, but this is actually brilliant. This is extremely effective way to communicate what you want to communicate. It doesn't use really complicated language. It doesn't, you know, it kind of strips everything down to the most basic components, which I think this, you know, as funny as it is, I think this is brilliant. You know, in the book about the space program, I talk about the Apollo 13 program. So the Apollo 13, you've probably seen the movie, but the rocket was damaged, and there was a lot of complications in trying to bring the rocket back to Earth. And in the movie, they do a great job of this. They say, we got to make this fit into the hole made for this using only this. Now, somebody watching this movie has no context of the space program, engineering, any of that stuff. This makes sense, right? This is interesting. And yes, like this is cool. If you are really into aerospace science and really want to know how this stuff works, this is really cool, right? This would be a cool schematic for you. But if you don't know that much, you can kind of distill that down to these guys built this thing and they called these guys on the phone 330,000 kilometers away. These guys were able to build that and they made it home alive. That's cool. And that's kind of how writing works, and I think that's how engineering works to the best of my understanding of engineering. And I think that's how communication works, whether I'm trying to, you know, speak Portuguese or I'm trying to assimilate notes into a book. So what's the best way to kind of learn English if you're looking for it? It's just do it. I watched telenovelas when I was learning Portuguese. I watched O Beijo do Vampiro. This is like from the 80s. But I watched, all of the episodes were online, and it was great because you could watch all of these. It's a telenovela. Everybody is very dramatic. So I could tell Thais would be like, what are you watching? I'd be like, I don't know, but that's the bad guy. And he's doing something evil. So yeah, watch movies, listen to music, and then talk to people even if you don't understand what they're saying and they don't understand what you're saying. It's the only way to learn, I think. I spent a lot of time in my first several years in Brazil repeating myself and trying to lose my terrible accent. But I think that's it. I think that's the secret to writing and to engineering and to speaking languages and communication is just do it and try to be as, you know, you don't have to learn all of the conjugations of fazer in order to make yourself understood when you are communicating with people. And I guess that's it. I'm going to plug my own thing now. If you want to, you know, these are all great ways to consume media in English, but you could also listen to my podcast. So that'd be kind of cool if you guys would. Yeah, I think podcasts are great because you don't have they're like kind of the next level up. You don't have the telenovela, like dramatic music and, okay, something bad happened there. I know something bad happened. So with podcasts, you can kind of listen to it. But I tell stories about things from history every week. And if you want to listen to it, that would be great. Okay, that's all I have. I'm happy to answer questions, and if there's anything that you guys want to talk about, I'm happy to talk and answer questions. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Ben.
Thank you.
Pessoal, ele deixou aberto para perguntas, caso alguém queira, ou uma conversação, alguma coisa assim, fiquem à vontade.
Hello, Ben. I have a question from me, not from YouTube yet, but your podcast. Why did you start it? What was the purpose? Do you like story? You write some stories, but you would like to put into audio, or I'm trying to make a question here, but what was the story behind the creation of the podcast?
Okay, so the story is that, like, I had a job sitting at a desk typing into a computer. I was basically a administrative assistant, a secretary kind of thing, and I worked for a university, but the university did not have summer classes. And so all summer I had to sit in my office. If people had questions, I had to answer them, or if there was a phone call, I had to answer it. But usually I just sat alone in my office doing nothing. So my training is in history. That's what I went to school for. It's what these are the kinds of stories that I really enjoy. And so I just started writing them on a website. It was I wrote them on a website starting in 2004, so like 22 years ago now. Every Friday, I would write a little story from history. I would write it in, it was a text file in Notepad, and I would just upload that to GeoCities. That's how old that was. And then, I just posted every Friday, and then eventually people started to listen to it. It was just text. It was no pictures, nothing. And people would read it. It was a blog, basically. People would read it, and then I remember people started to send me emails, people I didn't know, like that was really cool. And then it got really big. At some point, it kept growing and growing, and then I had a very big following. And I noticed that other websites and other people were doing similar kinds of things. So I said, maybe I don't make any money off this. I was spending money to make for web hosting. And so I said, okay, maybe I can do something with this. I wrote a letter to a literary agent. I said, I want to do a book of this stuff. Here's how many people follow my website. And the guy was like, don't show this to anybody. I will sign you tomorrow. Don't talk to anybody else about this. Okay, that sounds a little scary, but okay. And then he was able to get me a book deal for the website, and then that became more books, and that was, 15, 20 years ago now. I did the website for a very long time, but I thought after a while I kind of felt like maybe, after you do every week for 20 years, at some point I said, okay, maybe we want to try something different. Maybe we want to branch out and do something a little bit different. So we decided we wanted to switch to audio. It's kind of fun because you can get guests to appear on the show and you can ask them questions and things. I got to interview a couple people I had written about in the past, which was really cool. And that's it. So that kind of has been my life now. Is every Tuesday there's a new episode of the show, and I work on it, and I try to book guests, and we talk about stuff. And I'm still working on other books and movie stuff and all kinds of other things whenever I can.
Daddy?
Mm-hmm. No. He wants the laser pointer. I have this exact piece of equipment at home with the laser pointer and the slide clicker, and he uses it to get the cats to chase the laser. We have 2 cats, and the cats like to chase the laser around. And so when he saw this, he said, "No, I want that."
Ben, you write a lot about failures of people trying to build things, and a lot of engineering is failing over and over again until you don't fail. What's your favorite failure story?
Well, I talked about the Apollo 13 one. I did a presentation here a few years ago about the great fails of that program. But I think there are a lot of really interesting stories there. You know, every great success is the result of many, many, many failings. There was, you know, I made the Wright brothers joke earlier, but like they crashed their airplane like 4 times before they actually got it to do anything, right? There was a time that they had, they thought they were going to be able to fly, and they invited all of their heroes, all of their engineering heroes to come watch them. They're like, come to North Carolina, we're going to fly an airplane, it's going to be awesome. They sent letters to France, and like these guys, like there's no planes yet, obviously, so these guys had to take boats across the Atlantic to come here and be there. They invited the newspapers, they invited every person whose work they incorporated into their project, and then they flew it, and it crashed. And Orville Wright got a big bruise on his eye, and then they were like mad. They tried to make it fly again, it didn't go. They tried 3 or 4 times, didn't work. They were riding home on the train, just sad and miserable, like this is never going to happen. And that's kind of an interesting story, right? Because I feel like anybody who's tried to create anything, not even just engineering, but there are definitely times over the course of writing a book that you're like, this is stupid, why am I even doing this? You know, this isn't working, just rip it up, throw it away. But one thing that I think a lot of people don't really understand or don't think about as much is that, like, you know, for every amazing painting or amazing book or amazing piece of engineering, there were a lot of, if not like, you know, built the bridge and fell down, but like a lot of sketches that got thrown into the trash. And what I do a lot of talks for schools about the writing process. And, you know, when I say like writing is kind of like a muscle that you have to develop. You have to make a lot of bad stuff, and every piece you make is better than the thing you did before, and you can just keep improving. I think anybody who looks back at something that they did in the past and is like, this thing was awesome, that was the best thing I ever did, you should probably just quit. Because I think most people look back and be like, oh my God, I can't believe I thought that was a good idea. So I think that's all part of the epic fails thing of, you know, you're not failing, you just, you know, even with like scientific research, if you think, oh, this maybe these 2 things are correlated, and you do a test on it and they're not, that test isn't a failure, it's a data point that helps you fix the thing in the future.
Ben, thank you for your presentation. I liked a lot the images of Vikings, and then it was very funny. We have a question here on YouTube channel. Bia Manuel, she's asking, when did your interest in history begin?
Oh, okay. So that is, that kind of goes back to my father. So for me, this is something that I've always loved. My dad used to collect old gear. So he had an old Spartan spear, or, you know, reproduction of an old pirate flintlock pistol or something. And he would kind of show you the stuff and be like, oh, this was how they used to fight in the old days. They had the spear and the shield, and you know, I think anybody who really loves history had somebody who could make those stories real. You know, my joke when I talk at schools that a lot of times history is the study of a bunch of old dead white guys, and you have to memorize their birthdays. And I think that it's much more interesting if you can make, I think people who like history were able to have somebody who could take those stories and make them into real people. So one of the stories I like to tell about this is with the writing of the American Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Independence was an act of treason, right? Anybody who signed their name onto the Declaration of Independence if America lost that war to England, all of those people were probably going to die because they were citing their names on as traitors. And Thomas Jefferson was the second president. You see him on the nickel. You see all of these paintings of him, and he's very, with the white wig, and there's, he doesn't seem like a real person. But the story goes that when the Continental Congress was together, they kind of said, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to declare independence for the colonies. And then they went to Jefferson. They're like, Tom, you're going to write it. Because you're a lawyer, you're like the best writer we have, you should write this thing. And Jefferson was like 22 years old, and he was just like, are you sure? And they're like, yes, you're doing it. And he said, okay. And then he immediately went across the street to the bar and started drinking. And John Adams and Benjamin Franklin had to go over there and be like, it's okay, man, you can do this. You can go up there and write it. And then he was like, all right, I'll do it. And then he goes upstairs, he gets a room in that bar, at the upstairs of that bar. He goes up there, he locks himself in the room, and he writes the whole thing in like 2 days. And you hear that story, and you're like, okay, I feel like I can relate to that guy now. That guy seems more like a human than like a statue. And those are the kind of stories that I think people who like history, it could have people make it real for them. And that's kind of what I want to do with the books and stuff, is to make it feel like this is more than just, I think there are ways that you could write that Eric the Red story that it would be extremely boring to read.
Ben, I would like to know, as a writer, how challenging is to write to people with the less level of attention? For example, this new generation, we have Instagram, a lot of things that you are just scrolling on that app, and it's sometimes hard to write a book 10 minutes, for example.
Yes. So that was the thing with the website. That's why I ended up, one of the reasons I switched to the audio format was that people don't read the long form website articles anymore. My articles were very long, and they were well researched and stuff, but people weren't, the readership is down on that. People, I think, are still reading books. They still listen to books. There's a lot of audio books. People still listen to those. And, I think it really is just kind of what I was talking about here, is to just be engaging, and there are a lot of people who write, and I think over the course of researching and writing their story, they forget why they liked it in the first place. And so when I write about a lot of these things, I try to be pretty high energy of like, here's why I think this is great, and here's why I think you guys would like this. Let's get into it, and it's going to be cool, and I'm going to tell you guys a cool story. And I think if you can kind of project that energy, I think it helps. What people don't really want as much these days is a very, very dry, and there is a place for that. There is a place for like a dry academic writing, but mostly what I'm writing, the stuff I'm writing for is largely school kids who don't really want to read it. So you kind of have to grab their attention right away. And sometimes that's making jokes. Sometimes that's like you said, with the images, being funny with it. I have a 5-year-old, and he didn't make any noise while I was doing the presentation because I had a lot of fun images scrolling for him. And so I think all of that helps. Just kind of keep people engaged any way you can.
Okay.
Yeah. Ben, your last book was about the Ukraine-Russian war. I have read it, and I liked it a lot. Could you talk a little bit about this book, please?
Yeah. The new one that I just came out with it's called Putin versus Zelensky. It's a little bit different. So mostly what I have been writing is kind of fun, upbeat pop history. And I did a book on the Ukraine war. And so the book begins right when, the book ends right when the war begins. So the idea is when Russia and Ukraine began fighting, at least in the United States, there was a lot of sentiment of like, why is Russia and Ukraine fighting? You guys are all Soviet Union. Aren't you all the same thing? What's happening here? And, you know, if you ask a Russian person that, they will say, yes, we're all the same person. I don't even know why we're fighting. If you ask a Ukrainian, they'll say, no, we're like a whole other country. We have a different language, everything. And so I wanted to write a book to kind of outline, a lot of my background is in Russian and Eastern European area studies. And so I wanted to write a story about, here's the 1,000 years of history that goes back to why these people have been arguing, they've been having this argument for 1,000 years. They're shooting now, but they've been fighting for a long time. It dates back to the time period of Eric the Red. So I showed that map of Europe in 1000, and the Vikings were sailing all over the place. But one of the ways that, the main way that they got from Norway to Constantinople was to sail down the Volga River and the Dnieper River, which are basically present day Ukraine and Russia. And they made some settlements along the way, especially like the Swedes. They made some settlements there. They intermarried with the Slavs who lived in the area. They created a kingdom called Kiev and Rus, which is where both Russia and Ukraine trek their past. Some of the kings of Kiev and Rus are on money in both of those countries. That got all split up. There was Mongols involved. There's been many wars. Many empires have risen and fallen in the last, 1,000 years since then. And so the book I wrote was kind of outlining, there's a lot happening here, there's a lot going on, there's a lot of history between these two countries that, it's complicated. That book is a little bit more like, a little bit more dry than some of the other things I've done, because it's easy to crack jokes about Eric the Red, but it's hard to crack jokes about, present day war. So, but I'm happy with it, and I'm proud of the way it came out. But it was a lot of work to put that together.
How long do you work on the book to get it ready?
Usually, it takes me, especially if I have a little bit of background in it, I can research a book in about a year. It takes me a year to put all the research together. Then it'll take me another few months to organize it all. The writing is not so bad the writing doesn't take as long once I have the outline and the research done. Once you kind of have it all laid out, you just have to write it. That's the easy part. Read everything you can possibly read, build this super, super complicated outline, then just organize it, write the whole thing. Then I do a second pass where I go in and add, I call it like drawing the outline and then coloring it in. I'll do one pass where I write the whole thing out. I'll do one more pass where I add some fun details. I fix some grammar. How wouldn't it be funny if, maybe I can make a joke here. Maybe I could add something interesting here. And then I'm done. I don't look at it again. I can't remember who it was, but they said the great work is never finished. It's abandoned. You just can't. You can sit there for 1,000 years at tweaking every little thing to make it perfect, but with something like a book or art, you just can't. You have to just, at some point you have to give up, because there's always going to be something to change. And you just have to move on and be like, this is it, I'm gonna be done with this. Plus, the joke stopped being funny. The third time you've read the joke over and over again, you're just like, this isn't funny, I should take this out.
Okay, Ben, we have a question here on YouTube. It's from Julia, and she asked you have interviewed several people you had written about before. Which interview did you enjoy the most and why?
Oh, wow. Man, there's so many good ones, right? And it's really been a fun thing to do the podcast, because with a lot of these stories, I don't really know. I've gotten to interview some actors and directors and people I've written about, and I don't really know what I'm going to get some of the times. So it'll be like, oh, this person wrote this book on something. And sure, I will do my research on that person. I will watch YouTube videos of them, or sometimes they'll be on a different podcast and I can listen to that. But a lot of the success of the show involves being able to interact with that person. And sometimes I've never talked to this person before. I sign on with them, I chat with them for 5-10 minutes before we hit record, and then that's it. We're going to talk for an hour about some character from history, and building that rapport, it's been great. I really have enjoyed doing interviews. That was a really difficult piece for me when I started the show, though, because I've been forever just writing different stories from history, And then interviewing, when you see an interview done on TV, it seems so easy. Everybody, welcome to our new guest. Thank you so much for being here. What are you working on these days? But that stuff is not necessarily easy when you are the interviewer. The first time I interviewed somebody for the podcast, I got to the end of the show, and I was just like, okay, bye. I was like, I feel like there's something else you should be doing here. And yeah, so, you have to kind of prepare that bit of like, are you working on anything else? Where can people find your stuff online? Thank you so much for being here. We look forward to seeing you all in the future. Don't forget to like and subscribe. You have to plan out all of that stuff, which was all kind of new for me. But yeah, just getting to talk to some of these people, it's really interesting to get the insight on some of the things they're working on and some of the things they've done. And every interview is a little different than the one before it, but it's something I really have enjoyed a lot.
I have one question here for the final question. Since we are here at IEP, do you think engineers can gain a competitive advantage in the job market by knowing more about history, and why?
Yeah, I think that is definitely true. That's it's an interesting thing because there are a lot of, especially mostly what I follow is politics and historical stuff, but there will be things will pop up and it'll be like, I wonder if this will work. And I can point to things in the past and be like, we know it's not going to work because these guys tried it and it failed, right? We might have to take a different approach to this. I think, understanding the history of engineering, it can only help, right? It can't hurt you to understand it. And being able to look at some of these other projects and, if you're working on something new, to be able to go back and look at older stuff and be like, this thing worked, this thing didn't. This thing might have worked, but they didn't have the right technology at the time to get it done, but maybe we've kind of solved that problem now. I think a lot of that's really valuable. And then the other component is the stuff that Thais was talking about earlier of, not being discouraged when you attempt something and it fails, because that is valuable. That is that's how the system works, right? If you try something and it doesn't work out the first time, you're not a failure. You're just in this big group of people who also didn't have the thing work out the first time they tried, Shaquille O'Neal is in the Hall of Fame, but he's missed more free throws than any other NBA player in history. That's like, you just can't give up, because when you're looking at the history of anybody doing anything, there's been a lot of failure, and the people who succeeded weren't just geniuses the first time, they just didn't give up when they did fail. And I think that's a valuable lesson.
In history, we know a lot of names, as you said, of kings, their birthdays. Mm-hmm. We know a lot of names of heroes, but sometimes we don't know names of engineers that have done a lot of work. Mm-hmm. I would like to know if in the historical technical documents there is the name of these people, these engineers.
Some of them there are. Right, so there's we've got the Aeschyluses and the big name guys, but there's a guy named Imhotep who was involved with a lot of the ancient Egyptian work. With some of these, when you talk about ancient Egypt, Imhotep is the name that comes up a lot. He was a big architect there, but for a lot of these things, not only do we not know who built them, but we don't know how they built them. And that's one of those aliens questions kind of things. But in reality, when you're talking about these historical projects, it wasn't, the engineer does get stepped on because the king is like, I built this. We don't even write it down. We don't need to know your stuff. I built this. I was in charge here. And you'll see that with the Roman emperors a lot, and with the pharaohs and all of these powerful people that they're like, I made this thing. And so we'll just we'll put your name in very small text down here. And I think, I mean, to be fair, that still is happening, right? That's still how the governments work. But yeah, you know, the king wants all the credit for it. One of my favorite engineering stories from history is there was was Ivan the Terrible was doing the Trans-Siberian Railroad, and the engineers were having trouble. They were like, we can't figure out how to get it. The terrain here is kind of difficult. We have to draw the map for the rail line, and we're having some issues. And the story goes that Ivan was really mad about it. He was like, just do this. And he takes a pencil and he draws a line of where the railroad should be. But in drawing it, he takes a ruler and he draws the line. He picks the ruler up, or puts his finger there, moves the ruler, draws the line again. But that little spot where his finger was is like a 90-degree angle right, 90-degree angle up. It's like a lightning bolt, jag. And the engineers were just like, do you want to tell Ivan the Terrible that he messed up, or should we just, and they just built it. They were like, whatever, just do it exactly the way he drew it. And so it's one of the weirdest things, like people who really love trains always go, like they always want to go see this, called Ivan's Finger, and it's like the train does like it's a crazy left-hand turn, right-hand turn, right on top of each other, because the engineers were just, they didn't want to ask him to clarify. So that's you get all the bad things and none of the glory.
I wouldn't ask him anything to.
Ela quer jantar. Ele já comeu o jantar. Você comeu dois pastéis.
Boa noite, meu nome é Mirella. Eu vou falar em português porque você diz que fala também, né?
Sim, eu vou.
Pode responder em inglês.
Okay.
Eu sou do Instituto de Engenharia, sou engenheira civil e vi tua bibliografia aqui, parabéns. Eu queria saber, você mora no Brasil ou não mora nos Estados Unidos?
No. So I live in Seattle. My wife is from Brazil. She's from Curitiba, and so her parents live here, and so we come down here a couple months a year. So I've been coming down here for probably 8 years now, I think, and we have a little boy who's 5. So for the last 5 years, we've come down and we stay here for 2 or 3 months at a time. It's great for him. He gets to see Brazil. He's learning Portuguese. He gets time with the family. And one great thing about writing books for a living is that I can do it from anywhere. And so that's really nice for me because I can kind of stay here and work on my projects. And I get to run away from the horrible winter that they're having in the U.S. right now. Everybody back home is sending me pictures of snow and ice, and I'm sending them pictures of Caiobá.
Aqui no Instituto nós faremos uma festa esse mês próximo de 100 anos.
Ah, ok.
É uma comemoração muito especial para toda a engenharia do Paraná. É o Instituto do Estado do Paraná. Então, eu poderia até uma sugestão, poderia ser em inglês também, né? Sobre o Instituto, né? Podia dar uma dica para ele fazer um livro do Instituto do Paraná, de Engenharia.
Com certeza. I think I could. I think the celebration will be after we are gone, though. We are here until the middle of February, so I think it will be after that. But yeah, absolutely.
Pessoal, mais alguma pergunta? Então, acho que vou convidar todo mundo para a gente ir lá no palco tirar uma foto, todo mundo junto ali.
Ah, vamos lá.
Make a picture.
use narrative.
Puxar aqui. Puxa aqui.
Sim?
Oh Ben, where can I buy one of your books? Because I saw it only on Amazon.
Yeah, it's on Amazon. I did not bring any here, but